I never thought a letter from the Homeowners Association would change my life. But when I opened that cream-colored envelope on a Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona, I had no idea what was coming. My name is Aaron Ellis, and I had just moved into the Sunset Ridge community 6 months earlier. It was one of those pristine neighborhoods where every lawn looked identical, every mailbox matched, and apparently, every homeowner was expected to fall in line with whatever arbitrary rules some committee dreamed up over coffee and pastries. The letter was typed in formal business language, but the message was clear. My newly installed solar panels were an eyesore and violated the community aesthetic standards. I was being given 30 days to remove them or face daily fines of $200. I stood in my kitchen, reading the letter 3 times, my coffee getting cold in my hand. The solar panels had cost me $28,000 to install. I had done my research, hired a reputable company, and the panels were generating enough electricity that my last power bill had dropped to almost nothing. This month's bill, sitting on my counter, showed a credit of $15. The electric company owed me money. But according to Linda Patterson, the HOA president, my panels were destroying the neighborhood's visual harmony. I grabbed my phone and called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. Sunset Ridge HOA, this is Linda speaking. Hi, Linda. This is Aaron Ellis from 4782 Desert View Lane. I just received a letter about my solar panels. Oh yes, Mr. Ellis. Her voice had that particular tone that made my jaw clench, sweet but condescending. The board reviewed your property last week, and we all agreed that those panels are quite unsightly. They're visible from the street, and several neighbors have complained. Several neighbors. I have talked to my neighbors. They have been nothing but complimentary about the panels. Well, complaints were filed. The board takes these matters very seriously. Our community standards exist for a reason, Mr. Ellis. Property values depend on maintaining a cohesive aesthetic. I took a deep breath. Linda, Arizona has solar rights laws. Homeowner associations cannot prohibit solar panel installations. There was a pause. I am not familiar with that particular statute, but our CC and Articus are very clear about exterior modifications requiring approval. You never submitted an application for architectural review. I did submit an application. 2 months before installation. I have the certified mail receipt. Another pause, longer this time. I have no record of that application in our files. Regardless, the board has made its decision. You have 30 days. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the rest of that morning digging through my files. I found everything. The certified mail receipt showing the HOA had signed for my application. Copies of the application itself with detailed photos and specifications. And most importantly, a copy of Arizona Revised Statutes Title 33, Chapter 16, which specifically prohibited HOAs from banning solar installations. The law was crystal clear. Any covenant or restriction that prohibited solar devices was void and unenforceable. The HOA could establish reasonable rules about placement and appearance, but they could not ban them outright or require their removal. I scanned everything and sent it in an email to the HOA board, copying all 5 members listed on their website. I explained politely but firmly that I would not be removing the panels and that their demand violated state law. Linda called me back within an hour. She was no longer sweet. Mr. Ellis, I do not appreciate your tone in that email. The board will not be bullied by residents who think they are above the rules. I am not above the rules, but the rules cannot violate state law. We will see about that. The board is moving forward with daily fines starting 30 days from the date of our letter. I suggest you consult with your own attorney if you feel that strongly about it." The call ended. I sat there feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. This was really happening. That evening, I walked down to talk to my neighbor, George Martinez. He was retired, had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years, and seemed to know everything about everyone. "George, have you heard anything about complaints regarding my solar panels?" He looked up from watering his roses. "Complaints? Aaron, everyone on this street thinks they look great. Jim across the way has been asking me for your installer's contact information." "That is what I thought. Linda Patterson claims multiple neighbors complained." George shook his head. "That woman. She has been causing problems since she got elected president 2 years ago. Last year, she tried to fine the Hendersons for painting their front door navy blue instead of the approved black. Said it was too fleshy. What happened? They repainted it black. Most people do not want the hassle. Linda has a lot of time on her hands and apparently enjoys making people miserable." I thanked George and walked back home. This was not about aesthetics or property values. This was about control. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer named Richard Chen who specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Phoenix, and he agreed to see me that afternoon. Richard was in his mid-40s, wore a sharp suit, and had a wall full of certificates and case victories. He listened to my story, reviewed my documents, and nodded. "You have a strong case. Arizona law is very clear on this. The HOA is going to lose if they push this. So what should I do? First, I will send them a formal letter explaining the law and demanding they withdraw their violation notice. I will also request they confirm in writing that no fines will be assessed. If they refuse, we file for injunctive relief and potentially sue for harassment. How much will this cost? My retainer is $5,000. If it goes to court, probably another 10 to 15 depending on how long they drag it out. But here is the thing, Aaron. If we win, and we will, they will likely have to pay your attorney fees. Arizona law allows for fee shifting in cases like this." I signed the retainer agreement. Richard said he would have a letter sent out by end of business. 3 days later, I received the HOA's response. They refused to withdraw the violation notice and stated that they would begin assessing fines as scheduled. Linda had attached a note saying that residents needed to learn that actions had consequences. Richard filed for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out in Maricopa County Superior Court. During those 2 weeks, things escalated. I started receiving anonymous notes in my mailbox. "Remove the panels. You are ruining our neighborhood. Nobody wants you here." One morning, I found eggs splattered across my solar panels. Another day, someone left a bag of dog waste on my front step. I installed security cameras. The footage showed a woman in her 50s, blonde hair pulled back, wearing expensive athleisure wear, sneaking up to my house at 6 in the morning to leave one of the anonymous notes. I did not recognize her at first, but George identified her immediately from the footage. "That is Patricia Donovan. She is on the HOA board, Linda's right-hand woman." I sent the footage to Richard. He said it could be useful. The day of the hearing arrived. I put on my best suit and met Richard at the courthouse. Linda Patterson showed up with the HOA's attorney, a tired-looking man in his 60s named Harold Simmons. The judge was a no-nonsense woman named Judge Martha Reeves. She reviewed the filings, listened to both sides, and it was clear within minutes where her sympathies lay. "Mr. Simmons, are you seriously arguing that your client can override state statute?" Judge Reeves asked. "Your Honor, The HOA's covenants, conditions, and restrictions are contractual agreements that all homeowners sign. Mr. Ellis agreed to these terms when he purchased his property. That is correct, but Arizona law explicitly voids any covenant that prohibits solar installations. It does not matter what Mr. Ellis signed. The law supersedes it. Harold looked defeated. The HOA believes it has the right to maintain aesthetic standards. Aesthetic standards, yes, but not at the expense of violating clear statutory law. Mr. Simmons, your client is on extremely shaky ground here. She granted the preliminary injunction. The HOA was prohibited from fining me or taking any action regarding my solar panels pending a full trial. She also ordered both sides into mediation. As we left the courtroom, Linda glared at me. This is not over. The mediation was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I received my electric bill, $0. In fact, the power company credited me $42 for the excess electricity my panels generated and fed back into the grid. I took a photo of that bill and posted it on the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption: "Solar panels working exactly as intended." The response was overwhelming. Dozens of neighbors commented saying they wanted solar panels too. Several asked for my installer's contact information. A few people shared their own stories of Linda and the HOA board making their lives difficult over minor issues. One neighbor, Harriet Jenkins, wrote that the HOA had threatened to fine her $500 because she planted roses that were a slightly different shade of pink than what was listed in the approved landscaping guide. Another said the HOA had forced him to remove a basketball hoop from his driveway because it violated rules about recreational equipment. The thread grew to over 100 comments. People were angry. Years of petty tyranny were bubbling to the surface. Linda tried to have the neighborhood Facebook group shut down, claiming it violated HOA communications policies. The group administrator, a woman named Teresa who lived on the far side of the development, refused and made the group even more public. The mediation was predictably useless. Linda and the board refused to budge. They claimed they were protecting property values and that if they gave me an exception, everyone would start putting up solar panels and the neighborhood would look like an industrial park. Richard pointed out that was literally not possible under Arizona law, and that protecting the environment and reducing electricity costs were legitimate homeowner interests. The mediator, a patient man named Robert, tried for 3 hours to find common ground. Finally, he looked at Linda and said, "Mrs. Patterson, you are going to lose this case. The law is not on your side. You are spending HOA money on a losing battle. The members elected us to protect their investments. That is what we are doing." "You are protecting your ego," Richard said. "My client has every right to those solar panels, and you are harassing him because you do not like being told no." Linda stood up. "We are done here. We will see you in court." Richard filed the full lawsuit the next day. Breach of state solar rights laws, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a request for attorney fees and damages. The discovery process began. Richard requested all HOA documents related to my application, all communications between board members about my solar panels, and all financial records showing how the HOA was spending money on this lawsuit. What we found was stunning. The HOA had received my architectural application and had filed it without ever reviewing it or presenting it to the board. Linda had personally marked it as denied in the records 6 months after I submitted it, which was after I had already installed the panels. There were email exchanges between Linda and Patricia discussing how they needed to make an example of me so that other residents would not get ideas about making changes without permission. Most damning, there were emails discussing how they knew about the solar rights law but believed they could force me to comply anyway because most people would not want to fight or could not afford a lawyer. Richard was ecstatic. This is willful violation of your rights. They knew they were breaking the law and did it anyway. We also discovered that the HOA had spent over $30,000 in legal fees fighting my solar panels. That money came from the neighborhood's reserve fund, which was supposed to be used for emergency repairs and capital improvements. When this information leaked to the neighborhood Facebook group, people were livid. $30,000 that could have been used to resurface the community playground or repair the aging pool filtration system was being wasted on Linda's personal vendetta. A petition started circulating to recall the entire HOA board. Within a week, it had signatures from over 60% of the homeowners. Linda tried to fight back. She sent out a newsletter claiming I was a troublemaker who was trying to destroy the community's standards. She said that if the board was recalled, the neighborhood would fall into chaos and property values would plummet. The newsletter backfired spectacularly. People were done with being told what to think. The recall election was scheduled for a month out. In the meantime, the lawsuit moved forward. Then something strange happened. I started getting calls from a number I did not recognize. When I finally answered, it was a man named Douglas Patterson. "Mr. Ellis, I am Linda Patterson's husband. I need to talk to you. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in a different part of Phoenix." Douglas was a quiet man, probably in his late 50s, with tired eyes and a defeated posture. "I want to apologize for my wife," he said. "She has been impossible to live with for the past 2 years. This HOA thing has become an obsession. She spends every waking hour looking for violations, arguing with neighbors and trying to control everything. Why are you telling me this? Because she is going to bankrupt herself fighting you. She has already spent $5,000 of our own money hiring a private attorney to consult on the case, separate from the HOA's lawyer. She has convinced herself that if she loses this fight, she loses everything. Her identity is wrapped up in being the HOA president. I am sorry, Douglas, but that is not my problem. She is harassing me and breaking the law. I know. I am not asking you to drop the lawsuit. I am asking you to please, when this is over, do not pursue damages against her personally if you can avoid it. She needs therapy, not financial ruin." I looked at this tired man pleading for his wife and felt a strange mix of pity and frustration. "I cannot promise anything, but I will talk to my attorney." Douglas nodded and left. He looked like a man who had been fighting a losing battle for years. The recall election happened on a Saturday in the community clubhouse. The turnout was massive. Nearly every homeowner showed up to vote. The results were decisive. The entire HOA board was recalled by a vote of 73%. Linda, Patricia, and the other 3 board members were out. A new board was elected. The president was a retired school principal named Michael Torres, who ran on a platform of common sense and transparency. 2 of the new board members had expressed interest in installing solar panels themselves. The first official act of the new board was to withdraw all violations against me and issue a formal written apology. They also adopted new architectural guidelines that explicitly acknowledged solar panels as approved exterior modifications, requiring only a simple notification process rather than formal approval. But the lawsuit continued. Richard said we needed to see it through to establish precedent and recover attorney fees. The trial date was set for 3 months after the recall election. During that time, 7 other homeowners installed solar panels. The neighborhood started to look different, but not in a bad way. It looked forward-thinking and environmentally conscious. My electric bills continued to arrive showing credits. Over the 6 months since installation, I had not paid a single dollar to the power company. In fact, they had credited me a total of $218. My investment was paying off exactly as planned. The trial lasted 2 days. Richard presented our evidence methodically. The architectural application that was never properly reviewed, the emails showing willful violation of state law, the harassment and anonymous notes, the security footage of Patricia leaving threatening messages. Harold Simmons, the HOA's attorney, did his best, but he had no real defense. He argued that the old board had acted in what they believed were the community's best interests, but Judge Reeves was not sympathetic. "Good intentions do not excuse breaking the law, Mr. Simmons. Your clients knew about the solar rights statute and chose to ignore it. They spent thousands of dollars in HOA funds fighting a battle they knew they could not win. That is not protecting the community. That is abuse of power." The judge ruled in my favor on every count. She awarded me full attorney fees, which by that point totaled $18,000. She also awarded me $15,000 in damages for the harassment and emotional distress, to be paid personally by Linda Patterson and Patricia Donovan. She also ordered that the old board members were prohibited from serving in any HOA leadership capacity for 5 years. Linda looked shell-shocked as the verdict was read. Patricia started crying. I felt no satisfaction in their distress, only relief that it was finally over. After the trial, Richard and I stood outside the courthouse. "You should be proud," he said. "You did not just stand up for yourself. You changed how your HOA operates and probably inspired other homeowners dealing with similar issues." He was right. Over the next few weeks, I received emails and messages from people across Arizona and even other states. They had heard about the case and were facing similar battles with their own HOAs over solar panels, electric vehicle chargers, and other environmentally friendly modifications. I shared my experience, connected them with lawyers, and even testified as a witness in 2 other cases. The solar rights law was clear, but HOAs across the country were still trying to enforce outdated restrictions. 3 months after the trial, I received a check from Linda Patterson's attorney for the full amount of the judgment, $15,000. I used part of it to install a Tesla Powerwall battery system to store excess solar energy. Now I could power my home even at night using electricity I generated during the day. My total electric bills for the year came to negative $312. The power company owed me money. That ugly solar panel system Linda hated so much had completely eliminated my electric costs and would pay for itself in about 8 years. I also received an unexpected letter. It was from Linda Patterson, handwritten on plain paper. "Mr. Ellis, I owe you an apology. I let my need for control and order turn me into someone I do not recognize. I have been seeing a therapist since the trial, and I am starting to understand how much damage I caused. I am sorry for the harassment, the stress, and the wasted time and money. I hope you can forgive me someday. I am also having solar panels installed on my own home next month. You were right. They are the future. Linda." I read the letter twice. It was not the self-justifying excuse I expected. It seemed genuine. I wrote back a short note saying I appreciated the apology and hoped she was doing well. Sometimes people needed to lose everything to find themselves again. The new HOA board was functioning smoothly. Michael Torres ran meetings efficiently and focused on actual community issues like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events. Several committees were formed to address real concerns like traffic safety and updating the aging playground equipment. The transparency was refreshing. Financial reports were posted online monthly. Board meetings were open to all homeowners and minutes were detailed and accessible. Architectural applications were reviewed within 2 weeks, and denials were rare, and always included clear explanations based on legitimate concerns, not arbitrary aesthetics. 8 more families installed solar panels over the next year. The neighborhood Facebook group had transformed from a complaint forum into an actual community space where people shared recipes, organized block parties, and helped each other with recommendations for contractors and services. My neighbor George summed it up best one evening when we were both outside enjoying the cooler weather. "You know, Aaron, I have lived in this neighborhood for 16 years. This is the first time it actually feels like a community instead of a collection of people afraid to step out of line." I looked around at the houses, several now sporting solar panels that glinted in the sunset. It just took someone saying no to a bully. It took someone willing to fight when it would have been easier to give in. Most people would have just removed the panels and moved on. Maybe George was right, but I was not built that way. The principle mattered. The law existed for a reason. HOAs had a place in maintaining communities, but they did not have unlimited power to control every aspect of homeowners' lives. A year after the trial, I ran into Patricia Donovan at the grocery store. She looked different, less polished and severe. She saw me, and for a moment I thought she might turn and leave, but instead she walked over. "Aaron, I wanted to say I am sorry, really sorry. I got caught up in Linda's crusade, and I did not think about what we were actually doing to you. Those notes I left were cruel, and I am ashamed of myself. Thank you for saying that, Patricia. I appreciate it. I am selling my house and moving closer to my daughter in Tucson. I think a fresh start would be good, but I wanted to apologize before I left." We talked for a few more minutes. She seemed genuinely remorseful and much more relaxed now that she was not on the HOA board. People did strange things when they got a little power and convinced themselves they were righteous. The monthly HOA meetings became pleasant, productive affairs. Michael Torres made sure everyone who wanted to speak had a chance. Decisions were made by consensus when possible and by vote when necessary. The neighborhood pool got resurfaced. The playground equipment was updated. The reserve fund was being responsibly managed for its intended purpose. I started a small consulting side business helping homeowners navigate HOA disputes. Nothing formal, just advice and referrals to good attorneys. I had learned so much going through my own battle that it seemed wasteful not to share that knowledge. One case particularly stood out. A woman named Helen Jackson in Scottsdale was fighting her HOA over a vegetable garden in her front yard. The HOA claimed it violated landscaping requirements. Arizona law actually protected edible gardens similar to how it protected solar installations, but her HOA was being just as stubborn as mine had been. I connected her with Richard Chen and testified about my experience. Her case settled quickly when the HOA realized they were going to lose and face attorney fees just like Linda Patterson had. 2 years after installing my solar panels, I calculated my total savings. Not paying electric bills for 24 months had saved me approximately $3,000. The credits from excess generation added another $500. My system would pay for itself in about 7 years, then provide free electricity for the remaining 15 to 20 years of the panel's expected lifespan. Beyond the financial savings, there was something satisfying about generating my own power. On sunny days, I could watch the meter spin backwards as my house fed electricity into the grid. I was reducing my carbon footprint while saving money. It was the kind of win-win that made the whole battle worthwhile. The Sunset Ridge community had changed in subtle ways. People were more engaged, more willing to speak up at meetings, more likely to question decisions that did not make sense. The recall election had shown homeowners they had power when they stood together. 3 years after the original violation letter, I was re-elected to a second term on the HOA board. Yes, I had joined the board. Michael Torres convinced me that having someone who understood property rights and reasonable governance would be valuable. Serving on the board gave me new perspective. There were legitimate issues to manage. Enforcing rules against truly problematic behavior like excessive noise or abandoned vehicles. Maintaining common areas. Planning long-term capital improvements. The job was not about controlling people. It was about facilitating a functioning community. We updated the CC and Articus to remove outdated and potentially illegal restrictions. We added provisions protecting solar installations, electric vehicle charging stations, native plant landscaping, and other environmentally friendly modifications. We established clear, objective standards for architectural applications based on safety and genuine community impact rather than subjective aesthetics. The changes attracted younger buyers who appreciated the forward-thinking approach. Property values increased 12% over 3 years, outpacing similar neighborhoods in the area. Turns out people wanted to live in communities that felt welcoming rather than restrictive. I still had my solar panels. They still generated free electricity every day. My electric bills remained at $0 or showed credits. That simple fact, more than anything else, proved I had made the right choice to fight. On sunny afternoons, when I saw the light hitting those panels on my roof, I thought about that first threatening letter from Linda Patterson. I thought about how close I came to just giving in to avoid the hassle. I thought about how one person standing up to unfair authority could change an entire community. The panels were not ugly. They were beautiful. They represented independence, sustainability, and the courage to fight for what was right even when it was difficult. They represented a $0 electric bill and the freedom to make choices about my own property within the bounds of reasonable law. Linda Patterson eventually sold her house too and moved to a retirement community in Sedona. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was much happier there, volunteering at a local library and doing yoga. Sometimes people needed to be removed from positions of power they were not equipped to handle. Douglas Patterson sent me a Christmas card that year. He thanked me again for handling the lawsuit with as much grace as possible given the circumstances. He said Linda was doing better, that therapy had helped her understand her need for control stemmed from anxiety and insecurity. They were working on their marriage and rediscovering who they were beyond HOA politics. I sent a card back wishing them well. There was no point in holding grudges. The situation had worked out. Justice had been served. Lessons had been learned. The solar installation company I used saw a massive increase in business from my neighborhood and other nearby communities. They even used my story in their marketing materials with my permission. Stand up for your rights. Solar is legal. Solar is smart. Solar is the future. I gave talks at homeowner meetings in other communities, explaining solar rights laws and how to deal with overreaching HOAs. Knowledge was power. When homeowners understood their legal rights and were willing to defend them, HOA boards had to govern responsibly rather than arbitrarily. My electric bills continued to arrive every month showing the same beautiful number, $0, often with a credit. Year after year, the savings accumulated. The system worked exactly as promised, quietly converting sunlight into electricity and money back into my pocket. 4 years after the initial violation letter, I sat on my back patio on a warm Phoenix evening, drinking iced tea and watching the sun set. My solar panels were silhouetted against the orange sky, still generating a few watts of power even as the sun dropped toward the horizon. George walked over from next door. He was installing his own solar system the following week. "So, Aaron, do you ever regret the fight? All that stress and money spent on lawyers?" I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. Not for a second. Some things are worth fighting for: property rights, environmental responsibility, standing up to bullies. Plus, my electric bill is $0. Hard to regret that. George laughed. "Fair point. I am looking forward to joining you in the $0 club." We sat in comfortable silence, two neighbors enjoying a pleasant evening in a community that had learned to function with cooperation rather than control. The story spread beyond my neighborhood. Local news picked it up. A reporter from the Arizona Republic wrote an article about HOA overreach and solar rights. I was interviewed along with several attorneys and state legislators who were pushing for even stronger protections for sustainable home modifications. The article led to legislative changes. New laws were passed making it even clearer that HOAs could not restrict solar installations, and adding penalties for HOAs that knowingly violated homeowners' rights. My case was cited in the legislative record as an example of why these protections mattered. Standing up to the HOA had seemed like a personal battle at the time. I just wanted to keep my solar panels and reduce my electric bill. But it became something larger, a catalyst for change that helped other homeowners and pushed back against a system that too often prioritized conformity over common sense. 5 years after installing the panels, they had saved me over $15,000 in electricity costs. The system would fully pay for itself within 3 more years, then provide free power for another 15 to 20 years. The financial case was undeniable, but more important than the money was the principle. I owned my home. Within reasonable bounds and applicable laws, I had the right to make modifications that benefited me and the environment. No HOA board should have the power to override state law or harass homeowners for making legal, sensible improvements to their property. The Sunset Ridge HOA was now a model for how these organizations should function. Transparent, responsive, focused on genuine community needs rather than petty control. Other neighborhoods toured our meetings and studied our updated CC and Articus as examples of best practices. Linda Patterson's attempt to force me to remove my solar panels had backfired in every possible way. Instead of maintaining her vision of aesthetic conformity, she had sparked a revolution in community governance. Instead of preventing solar installations, she had inspired dozens of installations across the neighborhood and hundreds more across the Phoenix area as people heard the story. My $0 electric bills continued month after month, year after year. Each one was a small victory, a reminder that standing up for what was right had real, tangible benefits. The panels generated clean energy, saved me money, and represented something larger than mere utility cost reduction. They represented freedom. They represented the rule of law over the rule of petty bureaucrats. They represented a future where communities could embrace environmental responsibility without being held back by outdated thinking and arbitrary restrictions. On the 6th anniversary of receiving that first threatening letter from Linda Patterson, I received my monthly electric bill. Once again, it showed a credit. The power company owed me $37 for the excess electricity my system had generated and fed back into the grid. I took a photo of the bill, just like I had done that first time it arrived at $0, and posted it in the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption. 6 years, $0 in electric bills, worth every moment of the fight. The comments flooded in. People celebrating their own solar installations. People thanking me for standing up to the old board. People sharing their own stories of overreaching HOAs in other communities and how they had found the courage to push back. One comment particularly stood out. It was from a username I did not immediately recognize, but the message identified the writer clearly enough. "You were right. I was wrong. My electric bill is also $0 now. Thank you for not backing down. Linda." I smiled, full circle. The woman who had tried to force me to remove my panels now had her own, and was benefiting from the same technology she had once called an eyesore. That evening, I stood in my backyard and looked up at my roof. The solar panels gleamed in the fading light, doing what they did best, converting sunlight into electricity and freedom. They were not ugly. They never had been. They were beautiful, practical, and a symbol of everything worth fighting for. My electric bill was $0. My conscience was clear. My community was better. The law was upheld. Justice had been served. Sometimes standing up to a bully, even when it is hard, even when it costs money and time and stress, is exactly the right thing to do. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Everyone who faces similar battles. Everyone who needs to know that ordinary people can win against arbitrary authority when they stand on principle and law. The solar panels would keep generating electricity for years to come. But their real value was not measured in kilowatt hours or dollars saved. It was measured in the precedent set, the community transformed, and the simple truth vindicated. Some battles are worth fighting, especially when your electric bill arrives at $0.